انت منين في مصر؟ القاهرة. منين؟ انت عبور دي تعتبر في تجمع ولا في ولا ديت على شارع؟ اوه اوكي. اوكي تمام. هل مصر الجديدة؟ ده اللي اسمها. لا اتس اوكي جست a little bit. مصر الجديدة من الإسماعيلية أصلا. وبعدين رحاب على اسمنا. Okay. Yeah, absolutely. I'll sit. Yeah, I think it's sufficient, or do I need to hold the
This is
microphone?
not a mic. This is for the live stream.
Oh, okay.
The mic is
Okay.
whatever you.
Yeah. No, I'll just. Okay, why don't you take this one? I'll take that one. مش عاوز اعمل زي باسم يوسف كل شويه تقع مني. الحمد لله.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. Thank you everyone for joining. Very pleased to have Dr. Ahmed today from CAIR Chicago. CAIR is the Council on American Islamic Relations for those of you who have not been introduced to it before. It's a nationwide organization, the largest organization focused on civil rights and advocacy for Muslims in the United States. And then they have offices throughout the nation, with Brother Ahmed being the co-founder and executive director of the Chicago office for CAIR. Brother Ahmed is not foreign to IFN. He's visited us several times before, but obviously this visit is quite important given all of what's happening in Palestine. I want to sincerely thank him. He's been extremely busy, working day and night over the last 2 weeks, given all the events that are happening here as well. Receiving a lot of reports around retaliation, discrimination, hate crime threats, and things like that. So, and this is really why it's important for all of us to know about the efforts that CAIR is doing, and what it can do to help us be able to support Palestine through being here, inshallah.
Is it okay if the sisters come down up there?
We did tell them, so it's optional. So
Yeah.
yeah, if any of the sisters would like to come and sit here in the back in the chairs, so in terms of the format of the event, Brother Ahmed, inshallah, will start by talking about CAIR, the setup, the efforts, and what they're doing for the past, I think, almost 20 years for him, and most recently for the CAIR events. And then we're going to have a Q&A session for any of you who have questions about how that impacts your daily lives, and then a quick appeal for us all to support CAIR.
جزاكم الله خير. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. It is my honor and privilege to be with this gracious community that I have visited before indeed, and had the privilege of giving khutbahs in this very prayer hall. Once again, if any of the sisters want to sit down here with us, you're absolutely welcome. There are chairs, and inshallah we'll be having many more people joining us as the bus arrives. So before we get into the bulk of the conversation tonight, I wanted to ruminate or reflect a little bit about some of the guiding values and principles from our Islamic tradition that guide me and guide all of us, especially in tough times, but generally, because a Muslim doesn't change in a time of crisis. I always say the best way to respond to crisis is through principled communication and principled strategic thinking. But what does principled mean? If I wait until a crisis to figure that out, I'm in trouble. So it's important that we know our principles in advance in the good days as much as the bad days. And I would submit to you that when somebody asks me to tell them something about Islam, I start with the values and principles. I'm a little bit tired of people starting with the pillars, or here's what we do, here's what we don't do, the haram and the halal, the clothes and the diet. These are all important, very important. But they're not the beginning. They're not the start. They're consequences of these values. And they are exercises to empower these values. So what are these values? Let's begin by some definitions. I'm very big on definitions, especially because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that this Quran was brought in Arabic so that you may understand. So I think it's important to understand the Arabic terms behind these values and principles so that we can understand what they mean. Let's begin with Islam itself. Islam. We think of Islam as a religion of 2 billion people that was founded in whatever it is, 610 AD is what they say. Well, Islam is a mental state, and it's a connection with God that began with the first creation, Adam, the first human being, Adam. And every prophet and every man or woman of God was a Muslim in the tradition of Adam, in the tradition that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created for humans to connect with him. And the Islam that we talk about, the other Islam, the religion that Prophet Muhammad allegedly founded, wasn't founded, it was sealed. It wasn't started, it was sealed. The deal was closed. The final installation was delivered. And the deen was perfected, completed. But it was always there. That's the first thing we need to understand. So what is Islam then? Well, Islam is a state of mind and heart. It's a connection to Allah, rooted in a simple concept. People often say submission. I don't like that term. We go now to the translations of the Arabic, because submission has an element of coercion. If you're into wrestling, I don't know if some of our young people are into wrestling or know somebody that is, when somebody is stronger than you and forces you in a certain position, you submit. Okay? But there is no element of coercion in Islam. It's willing and it's voluntary. Others say surrender. To me, that's even more problematic. Surrender, I conjure up images of a gun to my back and my hands go up like this. Another form of coercion. But no, Islam is acceptance of a fact that Allah is supreme and Allah is in charge. When you accept that fact, you enter into a state of peace with yourself, with others, with your fate, with the world, and most importantly, with your God. And that sets the beginning of everything. It's the first value. That is why Islam comes from the root verb salama, which also the word salam, which means peace, comes from. If we can't get that value clearly understood into our communities and our ummah, then everything that's built on it is built on a false foundation. This is the true foundation of everything. And I remind you that in every salah, in every adhan, every day, Muslims say multiple times, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. In the Kaaba, in the Hajj, in the Eid. So what does that really mean? We tend to translate it as God is great. That's another mistranslation. It's not accurate. If I were to say, and some of you who know Arabic, you'll know what I'm talking about. If I wanted to say God is great in Arabic, it would be Allahu Kabir. But that's not what we're saying. Some say God is the greatest. The literal translation of that, if it were Arabic, would be Allahu al-Akbar. But we don't say Allahu al-Akbar. Why do we say Allahu Akbar? The literal translation of that actually is God is greater. God is greater. Now, this sounds a little weird grammatically, but the reason why it's conjugated that way is important. Because it's a living statement. The statement is not finished. You fill in the gaps. You have a disease, a loved one is sick, and that disease is great. It's cancer, it's MS, it's something. It's great. Allah is greater. You've lost a loved one, the grief is great. Allah is greater. You have a challenge ahead of you, Allah is greater than that great challenge. There's a great war, a great crisis, a great tragedy, Allah is greater. You have a financial loss, it's pretty severe, it's great, Allah is greater. You keep filling in the gap. So it's a living statement that is not with a full stop, a period, but it amounts to the same functional meaning, of course, that is Allah is the greatest. Because anytime you compare Allah to anything, it's always greater. So we get to the same meaning, but in a living manner. And that acceptance is Islam. But Allah tells us there's a higher level of this mentality. This is where it begins. And the next level now is beyond just acceptance. Now we come to something called Iman. And once again, that term has been often mistranslated and misunderstood. People translate Iman as belief in one God, faith. But if that were the case, if it was belief in one God, it was the belief that God exists, that God is one, then Iblis, logically speaking, the devil, would be a mu'min. Because if you were to ask Iblis, does Allah exist? He'll say, yes, I'm at war with God. Of course he exists. But he's not a mu'min. So what does it really mean? What it means is trust in God. Trust in God. When you realize that, you realize a few things. A, belief in God is a yes or no question. Do you believe in God? Yes. Do you believe in God? No. Maybe there's a third answer. I don't know. But they're still, for the engineers here, more or less, they're binary. It's a 0-1 situation. There's no, I believe a little bit, I believe a lot. It's like someone's either pregnant or they're not. Someone either believes or they don't. But trust is on a continuum from 0 to 100. So you can say, my trust is at 10%, it's at 30, it's at 50, it's at 100. And that's why when we talk about our Iman strengthening or weakening, that makes more sense when we're talking about trust. It doesn't make sense when we're talking about the belief in God that you make one time. The other thing is, the belief in God, you say one time, but the trust is an everyday thing. It's an everyday relationship. And that's also important to know. Just like acceptance, just like Allahu Akbar. And finally, we then realize why evil began, because it was at that moment that Iblis failed to trust God that darkness began in the world. It wasn't that he didn't believe in God, it's that he didn't trust God's judgment on him. Which brings us to us. How much do we trust God's judgment? We accept it. That's one level. We trust it's good for us. That's another. And to give you a mini analogy, and nothing is analogized to Allah. If I have a son, and I have 3, alhamdulillah, and one of them comes along and does something that it needs to be, punished, I might tell him, go to your room. I might ground him. And at that point, he has 2 options. He can rebel or he can accept. But if he accepts, he might be disgruntled. He might accept and be disgruntled. He might accept and feel hard done. He might accept and feel a sense of pity or why me or estrangement. The higher level is to not only accept, but trust in his heart that this father of mine is doing this not to spite me, not to punish me, because he loves me and it's good for me. I don't see it, but I trust that's the case. And again, nothing is analogized to Allah. But to trust in God's judgment and not just accept it is a higher level. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, don't say you are in a state of Islam. Iman, when you're just in a state of Islam. And then finally, a value that's important to us, these two things are in the mind and heart. That's where it all begins. But once there, then what do we do with that? Well, we activate a certain lifestyle. And that lifestyle, now at that level, action begins. And that level is the level of ihsan, where we begin to deal with the issues of the world, knowing that we accept God's will, knowing that we trust in it. So what do we do with that? We do our best. Allah only needs you to do your best. If you're going to pray, your focus is on your words, your actions are clear, you're not wobbly, your mind is not somewhere else. That's ihsan in prayer. If you're going to go to work and see a patient or a client or whatever, a customer, and you treat them with respect and with care and with love, and you do your absolute best in that regard. And you work hard to understand the trade and what you need to do and to perform at your highest ability, not the highest ability, but your highest ability, that's ihsan. So whether it's at work, whether it's in the gym, whether it's in sports, whether it's in homework, whether it's in prayer, ihsan is a way of life for a Muslim based on these values. It's all addressed to Allah. If we were to have those three things, we would be in a very different place as a Ummah. Everything else follows. Now crisis comes along. And the first thing I recognize, Allah willed this to happen. I accept. Allah willed this to happen. I have trust in God's will. When Allah wills things to happen, it doesn't mean that we are a passive, quietist faith. Now comes the part that Allah delegates to you. He doesn't want you to question why things happen. That's His role. And oftentimes humans spend so much time and energy questioning God's role. But our role that's delegated to us is then forgotten, which is simply how we respond to God's will. Not to question it or wonder about it or wish it didn't happen or decry it, but how do you respond to it? That's it. It was always going to be this way. Uhud, the Battle of Uhud, was always going to be lost. Whatever the Muslims did. There is no mashia except with the mashia of Allah. There is no will except with the will of God. The Battle of Badr was always going to be won, regardless of what Muslims did. How they responded to defeat, how they responded to victory, how you respond to poverty or loss, how you respond to wealth or success, how you respond, that's your area. So now the crisis is here. How do we respond? That's the only thing we need to worry about. Leave the rest to Allah. Even the result, leave that to Allah, because that's not really in your hands or my hands. Only what you do. That's it. So here I am with a crisis in Gaza, and it's not the first. And there's an injustice in the world. And there is a one-sided approach, a one-sided sympathy and statement. What do I do about it? What can I do? And if I do my best and realize that my response to the situation is all Allah is asking of me, and really the point of this life, then as much as there's heartbreak and pain, my heart is at ease, I feel empowered, I feel liberated, because when only Allah is in charge, you realize it's not Netanyahu. It's not the Israeli military. These are little Lilliputians, from Gulliver's Travels, little ants in Allah's world, nothing. Allah can wipe out anybody, anytime. The whole universe can come crashing down with kun fayakun. Who does anybody think they are? Who do I think I am? Because even in my response, and people have been praising, mashallah, brother, you've done, alhamdulillah, that I'm at your expectation. But I have no qualms in my mind that in Allah's world, I'm as insignificant as anything. But Allah has only allowed me and delegated an area, and my only focus is to fulfill my responsibility. To not let this pass without a response. To not do the best, to not have ihsan without a response. Not for praise, not for self-glorification or gratification, not for ego. Because there's only two religions ultimately. There's the religion of God and the religion of ego. And this is true of all so-called different religions. They're all really one, going back to Adam. Islam. But in the Jewish community, in the Muslim community, in the Christian, in the Buddhist, wherever you are, there will be people who have the action, have the words, have the look, but ultimately they're worshiping their own ego in the name of that religion. And we could be guilty of that if we are not careful. We have to always audit our souls and our hearts and question ourselves. And the best way to escape from that is to assume another Muslim value, and that is humility. Humility is not humility to people, it's to Allah. Humility to Allah. Remind yourself that whatever good or power you think you have, it's insignificant before Allah. Because I'll tell you something. There are many qualities in humanity, many good qualities. But there's only one that Allah has reserved for humans to be perfect at. Every other quality, however good we may be, God is greater. Allahu Akbar. I mean, generosity is a nice thing, but however generous you are, God will always be more generous. Magnanimity, benevolence, kindness, grace, strength, power, great qualities, whatever we have of them, Allah will have more. The only value that Allah has allowed humans to be perfect at and reserved just for humans is humility. That is where human greatness is. It's an ironic statement. But humility is the only area where true human greatness can be. But remember, it's humility to Allah. You can have izzah, you can have dignity, and you should. You should not lower yourself, you should not humble yourself, especially before those who are rivals or opposed or who hate Muslims, etc. That's misplaced, kindness and humility. We are kind with each other. We have strength and izzah with those who try to break us down. But we're humble to Allah, ultimately. So now as we deal with these issues, let's get to some specifics. We've set the foundation, and I've tried to do that to sort of be cordial to those who would be coming in. But at this point, I think we'll get to the meat of things. So CAIR Chicago is a civil rights organization that I co-founded with others to defend the civil rights of Muslims in the United States, in Chicago. This organization exists and existed before we started our chapter here. To defend Muslims and their civil rights against violations from government, from law enforcement, from private enterprises and entities, from individuals. To advocate for our well-being and strength, to empower us, to organize us, and to put us on the map. And as a result of this organization's presence and your support and our hard work, alhamdulillah, we've come from a place post 9/11 where no member of Congress or the Senate or anywhere would touch the Muslim community or CAIR, to a place where we have engagement with all of them, bar none. We have deep engagements with all of them. That doesn't mean we're there. Obviously, as you can see from this situation, this is one situation that will take a lot more years and work. How to move them on the injustices against Palestinians. But in many other ways, there's been a lot of improvements and remember, we are not a one-issue community. This issue is a very important issue, but there are many issues that we're working on simultaneously. And it's not going to be an all or nothing. All or nothing is not in Islam. Okay? We try to work with people for good, for common good. And whatever good we can get, we'll take. And we'll keep working for more and for more and for more. The only place where we want to be greedy is greedy for more good. Okay? Also, the media would not allow Muslims any space. They would bring debate, have a host of debate on Islam or Muslims. In the early days when I started, I always tell people there were two sides to that debate, the anti-Muslim side and the really anti-Muslim side. And that would be the debate. Alhamdulillah, we're able to break through that, put ourselves on these tables, bring a voice to Muslims, and now, alhamdulillah, there's so many more people doing that, well beyond CAIR. It's a different time. Oftentimes when crises occur, like post 9/11, we try to organize our community, we try to put out strategic plans and pointers and talking points, how to interact with our government officials, what to say in the media, what to say to our interfaith partners, how to deal with our schools. And the current crisis we are in extends beyond the direct crisis in Gaza. It has now become a crisis in the United States, in the Chicagoland area, in Plainfield, Illinois, in Naperville, Illinois, and so on and so on, Lombard, Illinois. And some of you may have been following the news and heard what happened. There have been many, many incidents, I would say. Are they right? I would say that, having been in this business 19 years, I would say that the climate we are facing now is as extreme, if not more, than the one we were facing post 9/11. In terms of the number of incidents that were being reported to my office, our phones are ringing off the hook, our emails, our WhatsApp groups. In terms of the hysteria beyond the hate incidents. So when I talk about the hate incidents, I'm talking about women who are harassed at a restaurant, public restaurant, or grocery shop, or a gas station. I'm talking about vandalism, I'm talking about people receiving letters of hate, threats, including to schools, Muslim schools, that cause them to shut down for a day or two because of these threats. And this happened with Al-Aqsa School in Bridgeview. I'm talking about bullying in schools. But beyond these types of incidents, and I made this very clear to the media yesterday in a press conference. Is everybody able to hear me okay? If you can't hear me, raise your hand. Everybody's able to hear me? You can't, or you can? You can. Okay. Beyond this, there's always other types of incidents that don't make the news but need to. They don't make the FBI's list of hate crimes and hate incidents, but they still matter. And I say this, if anybody's ever experienced bullying, okay, which I experienced the attempt at bullying. It didn't really go very far, but there was the attempt. You know that it's not always somebody just punching you in the face, right? It could be subliminal. It could be in a way that gets to you and you alone. Nobody around feels it. It could be a look. It could be ghosting. It could be a cold shoulder. It could be passive aggressive. But the end result is it conveys to you pretty clearly that we are trying to make you feel uncomfortable and inferior. And sometimes it's pretty direct, but many times it's like that. Those types of incidents, because of it, I've seen it in high school. And by the way, bullying in high school that I witnessed is what caused me to even want to be in this work. They created a monster, as they say. I vowed to just fight bullies for the rest of my life. So we made a whole organization out of it. But these types of things, they matter. Women who wear the hijab know this more than anybody. And oftentimes they've confronted this subliminal sort of attempt at sending these little messages that you're inferior through a look or a tone of voice at the counter or whatever it is, that they've come to almost not even see it anymore. But they know it's there. They know what I'm talking about. So we log these types of cases too, and sometimes they're even more direct. For example, we're seeing professors and how they talk about Israel and Palestine in class when there are Palestinian or Muslim students fall into that category, where they make them feel like you're powerless and my narrative is the only narrative in this class type of thing. And they put them in an awkward situation because they didn't say anything flat out racist, but they still essentially dehumanized or at least disempowered that student. And that student is at a disadvantage in the power dynamic. This is a teacher, they're a student. We've seen this in companies between bosses and employees, employers and employees. And again, we've seen it also direct. We've seen letters that have come out. And I've never seen this before. Suddenly, every company is acting like it's an embassy or a State Department. You know, they make medicines or they make computer chips, or it's a law firm or it's a hospital, and suddenly they're issuing a release about Hamas and Israel and Palestine and Gaza. We stand for this and we stand for that, and here are links to donate to this and that. It's quite bizarre because, and again, I'm not making any statements about the events, but the fact that it's in a foreign country, and the fact that these are not political entities, for them to go out of their way to make these issuances, they create a certain atmosphere. Because what happens then is they're very one-sided, and they don't understand the nature of the conflict or the complexity of the conflict. So they send a message to certain communities that are supposed to be in a safe space under their leadership that you don't matter. And they tell a subset that only you matter. So we've seen a lot of that as well. And we've seen people fired for posting on social media or saying something that is counter to the monopolized line in this country right now, that is echoed by the media, by the president, by all politicians. So what we've done in this environment of hate crimes, hate incidents, and the difference between the two, you've heard me say them separately, is that hate crimes are designated officially as such by law enforcement. After they investigate, that's why you'll see CAIR Chicago issue a press release and call for a hate crime, a charge. It's a charge. When you're charged with a hate crime, the penalty is strong. It's important because it's a good deterrent. When people who do things that they consider not a big deal, like send a letter that says, all Muslims must die or something like that, or they paint a swastika on a synagogue or an anti-Muslim thing on your masjid or whatever it is, it might seem to some people it's not a big deal. I didn't kill anybody. I didn't hurt anybody. I didn't steal anything. But by having this hate crime charge, which is something we worked on with others back in the day, we then treat these things just as seriously as major crimes. And so those then who think it's not a big deal have to begin to think it's a big deal. Hate incidents are anything that has hate motivating it, whether it's charged as a hate crime or not. And then there's the other types of bullying and harassment that I described, including in schools, hospitals, law firms, companies, retribution and rebuke against those who post on social media, et cetera, et cetera. And these are all injustices. I mean, if you put yourself in the place of someone, a doctor or a nurse or somebody who's been working hard and they express their position, and oftentimes these are not even controversial positions. I mean, the injustice is so strong. This is somebody saying, supporting the Muslims in Gaza, the humans in Gaza, Palestinians in Gaza. And then they'll be accused of supporting Hamas or something. So now, standing up for human rights is something that is going to be punished. And then others in the same company might beat their chests for I stand with Israel, while Israel is engaging in these human rights violations and war crimes. Look, my language it's not incendiary. It's careful, but it's correct. This is another important thing. Okay? It's very important. Because another value, I keep going back to the values, okay, of a Muslim, and this is all from the Quran. Every single set I've said here is from the Quran. These are indisputable. There's a lot of debates in the community about the little details of the religion, what you wear here, what you do there, this madrasa, this tariqah, this madhab. I never talk about these things. There's no time for me to get there. Because guess what? At the value level, we have a lot of confusion, and we're not focused, and we don't get it. And I think if we spend a lifetime on this area, we will still not have completed. So let's not ever worry about the little bickerings that we have in the religious communities of this country or the world, please. In the Quran, it's clear. Allah tells me and tells you, in his recipe of success, there's 2 lines. Can you imagine? 2 lines. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim wal-Asr. Inna al-insana lafi khusr. إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالصبر تواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. So Allah says everybody's in loss. So now we know that this is a recipe for success because everybody's in loss except those. So now comes the true success, right? The true winning. They're not in loss. Those who believe, who have iman, who trust in God, we talked about that, and do good. This is the ihsan part. We talked about that. But then the two parts that I've left until now, he said you have two allies. We're always looking for allies, interfaith allies, government allies, powerful allies, an attorney ally, whatever. But you have two real allies that you should never, ever leave behind and should always make a priority. The first is haqq, and the second is sabr. So let's go back to our definitions. Let's go back to the concepts. Haqq is often translated as truth, and sabr is often translated as patience. And I accept those definitions, but they're limited in the English language compared to the Arabic. Haqq is truth, but haqq is anything that haqqa, that is a fact of life. It includes, and this is where we Muslims need to kind of parse out these concepts to make them more applicable. You know, what people say I'm obsessed with data. I say Allah said, وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ. Data doesn't lie. Fact checking. That's me being a good Muslim. Because Allah said, وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ. Fact checking is part of truth checking. You see how these little things that maybe a journalist or a professional might think are important and Muslims are not talking about are actually at the heart of our faith. So all these Muslims, all my family and yours, extended families and friends, our communities, when we start to gossip, when we start to take a rumor and run with it, when we start to repeat things without really getting to the heart of whether they're true or not, for example, when we don't know anything about the stats and the data that matter to the issues that matter to us. You want to talk about Palestine, but you have no idea about dates or how many people died when, or the general, statistical and data, fact-based story that you can arm yourself with. Then we're not doing ihsan because we don't have the ally of truth, which includes fact-checking and data. And then sabr. Sabr does mean patience, and you need it with haqq because the path of truth is hard. So you need patience because you will not win. You will win. This is the promise of Allah. You will not win quickly. You will win over time. So you need patience as the second friend, as a second ally. And patience, again, remember I told you that was a limited definition of sabr. So what's the expanded definition? Patience in English tends to give connotations of passiveness. Be patient. We go like that. Wait. So it's sit, don't move, just wait. That's not the case in sabr. Sabr is an action, actually. It's actionable. When Allah says, فَاصْبِرُوا, it doesn't mean just wait. It means persist on the path, patiently. Be disciplined. This is an important word for the translation. Discipline. Discipline yourself with patience. So persistence, consistency, discipline are part of how we tread on that path of truth and searching for facts and data. And we keep going and keep going and keep going. That is something actually. So here we are now working to try to put out these statements of fact. We're trying to push back against those things. We have a plan to deal with this whole situation. So what do? We have lawyers on the back end that receive these complaints, everything I've just described, and they know, they've been trained on how to deal with each of them. So in the hate crime, the worst that we've seen maybe in the history of this country as far as how gruesome it was, and I won't repeat details here for the ears of our young people, but you know what I'm talking about, with the young boy. Alhamdulillah, we're able to, first fact check, because everybody was calling me, and the news broke out, and I said, look, I need time to make sure that this is what it is. Because if it is what it is, our plan will be put together, and we're not looking back. We're going fast. But you don't want to do that, and then you discover, oh, it was a jealous ex-partner. We've seen before situations where you think it's something, it turns out something else, and then you have egg on your face. But we looked into it, we did our research, our fact checking, and it looked like it was what we thought it was. So we pressed law enforcement with a press release and called on them to declare it a hate crime, to make the charge. Alhamdulillah, again, this is due to the grace of Allah, but also to the power that has been built as a result of the grace of God in this organization within mere minutes, the charges were announced. Now I had my marching orders. The law enforcement are clear about what it was. So we contacted with the family we had already contacted, we did our due diligence. We brought the family, we sat with them, we explained what we were going to do. We held a press conference, and we got ahead of the story. It's very important for Muslims to do that. We owned the narrative. We made the narrative clear that what happened, we were clear about the details. We were clear about the context, because now we control the narrative. If there was someone else, they would just say, here's the incident as if it was, I don't know, a lightning strike, or an earthquake, force of nature. And we're all sorry, and it's horrible, but that's the end of it. There's no context. But we made sure the context was part of the story. We made sure the person who did this is understood as to what radicalized him. We use that word. We always use it with Muslims. And we pointed at the media, we pointed at the politicians, and we pointed at the right wing over there as to what they were creating. And to everybody here who muffled voices and plugged ears and erased the suffering of Palestinians, that contributed to their dehumanization. So we had to have a very sophisticated, very clear narrative. It wasn't just, and I use these words, it wasn't just assertion, it was erasure. Assertion is when you say human animals. It's when you say human shields. You're pummeling into the hearts and minds of my fellow Americans a certain sense of dehumanization. These people are not people. They're not real people. It's fine if they die. It's fine if I kill them. That's assertion, but also erasure. When you then turn around and the Gazans and the Palestinians are dying in the thousands, and you don't express remorse, you don't express empathy, you don't report on it, you don't show the pictures, you don't show the hurt, you don't convey the details. It's like it's not happening. As a matter of fact, you're cool with it. As a matter of fact, you're not just silent, you cheer it on. As a matter of fact, you pay for it with our tax dollars. As a matter of fact, you send our highest elected official, you shuttle them off to sit next to those who are committing these crimes, shake hands, give a little hug. I got you, brother. All of this we point to as we talk about this moment of failure, collective failure. This is the price. This is the cost. This young, innocent, sinless soul had to pay the price for the failure of adults in our world. And if we were just to come and express crocodile tears for the scene, the gruesome scene, without contextualizing it, then we've done nothing to honor the life and the sacrifice of this family. And we made that narrative so clear that not one media channel, not even the most right-wing Zionists, could ignore it. They all had to report on it. And suddenly, the politicians had to respond to it. Because we know how the game is played. If there's a strong enough, current, they have to go with it. So we got, suddenly, the governor wants to come, the mayor wants to come, the president wants to call. The president called yesterday, called us, Biden, spoke to the family. Now, just on my way here, the ambassador of Japan, is coming from Japan to see the family. Now, we don't need any of this, right? But it's important that this environment is not a whisper in the masajid. This environment is not a complaint in our WhatsApp group. It's important that these leaders are forced to contend at least with its existence. I'm not happy with their response, but we were going to force that they know it's there and they're going to acknowledge. That's an important, do not think that's not an important step. That is an important step. Powerful communities are able to get that, at least. Weak communities, it happens, nobody bats an eye. Now, the following step was to try to work with the family, of course. I'm not going to get into that detail, but there's a lot of work that's done with the family to, alhamdulillah, put up a launch good, and the community came through. We raised $600,000 for the family to make sure our brother and sister are not left in need at this time. We're in communication with the mother who's in the hospital, who, between you and me, has been released, alhamdulillah. And we have the best committed, and specialized organization that deals with women's issues and with psychosocial issues and things like that, and finding homes, working with her, taking care of her, and they're working directly with me. And we'll be giving out the money to them to support them. So that's there. And of course, also, I'm working with a top law firm in the country to sue everybody that we can for this family. If it has to be the president, if it has to be the media, if it has to be the government, whoever it is, to shirk their responsibility to create this atmosphere, we're going to sue. So all that's happening. But then we have to continue to pummel the narrative into the media. So we've been in the New York Times, the BBC, the Guardian. It's been just constant wave of interviews in media to ensure that this boy will not go without raising hell. And then there's organizing our community, talking to our leaders and our groups to make sure we know what to do in terms of mosque safety, in terms of having Know Your Rights sessions for our communities. We're talking to our schools, etc. About the bullying initiatives, we're talking to our officials to legislate new laws to ensure anti-bullying measures, we're talking to the principals to change their codes and their policies. A lot of things are happening at the same time to protect this community and empower it in this crisis, but moving forward. Because in crisis is an opportunity. Okay? At the same time, we're going on the offensive. We're not on the defensive. So if someone calls me saying, this rabbi, quite frankly, right, he called me. He said, Ahmed, I want to come to the Mosque Foundation for the funeral. But I want you to know I'm a Zionist. So if people are not going to be, people don't want me there, I fully understand. Or if I'm there and somebody, is not nice to me, I get it. I said, no, listen. If you want to come, pay your respects, as in whatever you are, Zionist, you're welcome. In our home, in our masjid, we honor our guests. Come as you are. No one's going to touch you. No one's going to bother you. Today we're humans. Tomorrow we debate politics. So he came. Nobody bothered him. He had his yarmulke. He was clearly identified. And this was in the thick of things. Palestinian flags, there was a dead Palestinian boy. But that's part of being Muslim, is to teach our own people not to conflate things, right? Not to misdirect anger, and not to respond with an injustice with another, also a Quranic message. So nothing happened. Everything was great. He left. The next day, I get a lot of media calls, as I normally do. But now they're all telling me something a bit interesting. They want to cover the story and the funeral. They're all saying, I'm like, what's your angle? And the first one said, we want to talk about the rabbi that came and, Muslim-Jewish relations and what this means to you. The next one said the same thing. The next one said the same thing. So my answer to them was, I always answer questions. I never not answer questions. You ask me a question, I'll answer it. So the question was, what does it mean to you? So I answered, nothing. What? I'm like, you want a cute story, you're calling the wrong guy. What it means to me is nothing. Now, I have Jewish friends. I have nothing against the Jewish community. But the fact that one person asked to come, and we said, of course you can, and we were gracious in hosting them, and then for the media to call me and to pretend that this low bar, extremely low bar action is somehow a story, a national story about the beauty and the wonder of Muslims and Jews working together in this environment, it's not true. That's whitewashing. I'll tell you the true story. The majority of these organizations have been quiet. The silence is deafening. They're afraid to speak up, and they put instead signs on their lawns, I stand with Israel. And when they put these signs, what they're telling me, clearly, these are not my words, these are theirs, that they stand with war crimes. Their choice, their words. that they stand with genocide, they stand with ethnic cleansing. That's what I'm hearing. If Denmark were to invade Luxembourg, I don't know how good you guys are with geography, or Belgium or Netherlands, anybody in Europe, right? And they would kill 1,616 children, because I know all this talk about militants, and 3,500 civilians. And I were to say, at that moment, I stand with Denmark. Then I stand with what's happening to these civilians. That's what you're telling me. Meanwhile, you guys in the media are always jumping on me and my community. Do you condemn Hamas? Do you condemn Hamas? Do you see me with a sign at my masjid saying I stand with Hamas? There's not one sign in the city of Chicago in front of a single mosque that makes that statement. So what are you asking me to be on the defensive about? You need to be on the defensive because you're making that statement. So I got to ask you, why do you stand with war crimes? Why do you stand with that? We're done with being on the defensive. We're done with stepping into poor frames, false frames. And we're not even going on the offensive. We're going on a truth march forward, fearlessly. And again, at no point does any of this cause me to have agitation or emotion or anger to be anti-Semitic. You'll find me and my community and my organization to be at the forefront of fighting anti-Semitism. Not to please anyone, because that's a Muslim value. We don't believe in being unfair or unjust. But that doesn't mean that it will stop us from, that there's a holy cow that we can't criticize. That you're off the hook. Nor the scaremongering about this type of language being anti-Semitic will stop us. Because I know the difference. I'll fight you on the difference. And it's your choice. You've made that choice. So you have two choices. Either take down the sign, stop standing with Israel, or make the argument successfully that Israel isn't killing 1,616 children. You cannot factually make that argument. Therefore, you only have one option. If you don't, then you've made your position clear, and it's clear. So I've been telling the media, the fact that one guy comes and condemns this easy to condemn thing, a sinless 6-year-old, anybody in the world is going to be able to do that. And they want a big old clap across the national papers and broadcast channels? No, thank you. Have this person, have all of them, have a press conference and denounce what is happening in their name with what they stand with against these civilians, and then maybe we'll have a cute story. We'll have a nice story. But remember, for me to be able to say all this, I had to stand on principle first. I had to have a genuine problem with the death of Israeli civilians, which I do as a Muslim. Not as a PR act, not to please anybody. And I'm happy to fight any Muslim who thinks this is a problem also. When you're strong on principle, you're strong. And when you're strong on principle today, tomorrow, when the cards flip, you have a leg to stand on. When I took this position, we didn't know what was going to happen. Nobody had died in Gaza. But the fact that I took this position, I can now take the same strong position here. And those who thought that they needed to be smart or whatever, or powerful or tough, and not have a problem with civilians on the other side being harmed, now have a problem because they'll have a double standard. They'll be two-faced if they have a problem with what the other side is doing. وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ. My alliance is to principle, fact, truth, and it will always guide me. It will always be consistent. It doesn't change. We're all God's creation. We're all human beings. And justice is justice. Right is right, wrong is wrong. And now what we're seeing is very wrong. And mind you, the difference, though, again, we have to be smart about the difference. Because they always say, oh, the two are not the same. Like, yeah, they're not the same. One, we do not have signs supporting, the other you do. One, we do not send a penny to, the other we send billions to. One we declare a terrorist organization, the other we set as the region's only democracy and our greatest eternal ally. So yes, there's a difference. And yet, they're killing 1,616 children. Now, of course, there's going to be all of these types of propaganda, human shields, etc. And we respond to them. We say, these are tropes meant to dehumanize Palestinians in order to justify the killing of their children. This has been done before. This creating the image of barbarism in Africa in order to kill millions of Congolese by the Belgian Emperor Leopold, whatever his name was, during the age of colonialism, to shoot down the entire inhabitants of Tasmania, an island south of Australia that I visited, to extinction, because it was a sport for the lords and the earls to hunt them like they hunt rabbits. To extinction. And we can't decontextualize that history, that colonial, that racist history of rendering a community, a population so barbaric that they would offer up their own children as a shield. And that's why they died. Your head got in the way of my bullet. We need to have our talking points. We need to have our narratives. We need to fight with strength, not with emotion. There's a difference. With principle, not with agitation. To not go beyond the parameters of reason, which Haqq always is, not with flippant, sensational words and phrases. And lastly, we started working with our youth to ensure that they too knew how to deal with things. And we tell them, look, when a people are trying to dehumanize you, I don't want to hear you respond with chants, because that becomes noise. If someone is working day and night to dehumanize you, and your response is, hey, hey, ho, ho, this has got to go, or river to the sea, or something. These are very impersonal statements. People don't know what you're talking about. And what river and what sea? And you have this little strip called Gaza, people there are dying and it's sieged. Like, we got to stop doing that. I said, focus on your human stories. If someone's dehumanizing, you humanize. That's the fire, that's the water. Put out the fire, and it's like garlic to a vampire. They vanish. Because existence is resistance. I'm all for resistance, but the first step to that is to exist. Right now, they're trying to wipe this existence, trying to say there's nothing there, just a bunch of militants and their human shields. It's our job to not be erased. It's our job to say there is life. There's a mother, there's a father, just like you. There's a child, there's an uncle and aunt, just like yours. There's a school, there's a hospital, there's a library. There's a wedding. In the middle of all this, in the middle of no food and no water and no, I'm not talking about right now, I'm talking about the general siege, which has been around for 17 years. Okay? There is still life. People still celebrate. People still go to school. People still laugh. And all this life cannot be erased. It will be if the story is not told. So I tell our Palestinian brothers and sisters and others, tell their stories, share their pictures, tell the story of your aunt, your grandmother, your grandfather, yourself, how you left. Very few people know that the 2 million in Gaza are mostly already refugees from other parts of Palestine. I don't hear that being said much. That's a significant part of the story. Yesterday in a press conference, we told the media flat out, and we had every camera there. We said, if you are talking about Palestinians and you only say Hamas, you are lying to the American people. If you're telling the story of this conflict and you don't mention the words occupation and oppression, you're lying to the American people. If you're talking about this conflict and you don't shed tears for 1,616 wadiyas, like the wadiya that was here that everybody cried about, and rushed to give us condolence, the president, the governor, the mayor, the ambassador. These are 1,616 of him. You have no tears to shed. Those tears were a lie. Sorry. We have, unfortunately, school shootings here sometimes. I say, imagine if there's 100 people killed in one. This would be wall-to-wall news for weeks and months. Now imagine every day there's 100 kids. shot in a mass shooting. For 2 weeks. It'd be Armageddon. That's what's happening. 100 are dying a day. Gaza. So my dear brothers and sisters, as we open it up to your feedback, I want us to remember, Allah's in charge. I don't say anything I say here, I know this, I know more. My heart is at peace, actually, because Allah's in charge. I have trust in Allah. It's only about what we do about it. And my singular focus, and I want it to be yours, is what you can do to make this short life that Allah has given you, and whatever skill and power and energy and money and time He has given you, to put it forth for action, for goodness, until our time is up, and then we are among the winners, inshallah. Jazakumullah khair, wassalamu alaikum.
We'll open up for questions from the community and our B, and for those who are online can do it. Anyone has a question? Yes, go ahead.
Makes sense.
To summarize for those who want, the question is regarding us individually reaching out to senators, congressmen, local officials, and the fact that we're not feeling a big impact from that, and whether we are as before that.
Thank you. Sister, there's three aspects to the answer. One concerns you and others like you. One concerns the senator and others like her, and one concerns the community. So for the first answer that concerns you and others like you, remember, what is the real purpose of you doing this action? Yeah. Just briefly, because people can't hear you, and I'll tell them what you said. So that's now I'm talking from the spiritual sense. So the answer was it's to try to make change, which is the reason why anybody makes action. But remember, if Allah wants the change to happen, He doesn't even need us. Don't forget that. I would argue that the real purpose of any action is ihsan. And leave it there. If you have done your part, you have no regrets. Don't even look at the result. As long as you know you're doing the best you can. I don't want a sloppy job, check the box, and then, oh, I've done my part. Allah knows. Allah judges by heart. Remember, more than anybody, the only one that can just see your heart is Allah. You do that, you're done. Your part is done. So that's on the you level. I say this because a lot of people have regret or have a sense of loss of time or waste of time, and not just in terms of letter writing or calling, but in anything. I've raised this child, I've done my best, and now this child has gone off and done this. Doesn't call me anymore, whatever, has committed a crime, whatever. And they're heartbroken. No, you've done your part. That's the real point. Everything else was written. You couldn't have stopped them. Now, as far as her, actually, you did have a result, because when she called me the other day, and it was her herself, she called me because of all these people like you. You think you're not having an impact, but these things snowball. You mentioned the African American community. Whatever successes that they had, they didn't have overnight. And it wasn't a letter writing campaign. It was a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, and a lot of years, and a lot of sacrifice. So we need more people like you. We need you to persist, and it makes a difference. And when she called me, I mean, that's not the result, right? But she called me. She called with the sense of, I worry what he thinks, meaning the community thinks, about where I'm at. That's a good step. I'm about to release this bill. And she's trying, if we didn't matter, she'd just release it. Now, she's probably going to release it anyway, because the other side is strong. But at least now we've got to a point where there's concern about the reaction. That's a step. Remember, sabr. You keep on, we're not going to accomplish all we want overnight, but we're going the right direction. And so I told her, look, you want to give 100 million to the Palestinians in your bill, that's very sweet. But in the same bill, you want to give, 40 billion to those who are killing them, that's not very sweet. I said, you have one hand putting a Band-Aid on a gushing wound of an injured person, and with the other hand, you're giving knives to those who are injuring them. Does that make any sense to you, Senator? She said, I see how you, I said, listen, you have children? Said, yeah, I have 2 children. What are the ages? The same as mine. We're able to have a heart-to-heart human conversation. Now, again, I'm not going to change our politics, because the reason why the politics are the way they are is because of pressure, money, donors, power, which we don't match. But there's a human inside everyone. And if that's what we can get to at the moment, that is the ihsan we can make. To the third point, and last point, you are right about that we can't just do letter writing. You are right that we need a change. And that's why we're in leadership. That's why we're having these conversations. Yes, I'm telling everybody, and people are telling me, we need change. We need to organize better. We need to have better strategies. We need to not waste time doing the usual venting. We need to care about influence.
The question was, what's the best news outlet for us to follow for non-Arabs?
If you want, on this particular crisis, I would recommend Al Jazeera English. Although today, ironically, just today, Netanyahu and the government of Israel declared that they're going to shut down their operations. And really, any operations of any media is critical of his war. Which takes me to another talking point that we were making in the media, that while President Biden was saying, in this situation, we got to stand with Ukraine and Israel, and he's comparing the two, we're saying actually Netanyahu is Putin in this equation, and he's taking a page out of his playbook. And we have a complete double standard in the response. On one hand, we decry Putin. On the other hand, we are Putin's puppets in the hands of the other Putin, right? Netanyahu. That does the same thing, if not worse. Actually, it's been worse in terms of the numbers of people dying. And lastly, on that point, we're giving money to Putin in the form of Netanyahu to do what we say the whole world should shake and shudder for, rightly. So there's that clear double standard, and it's something we have to keep on exposing. So Al Jazeera English, even though it might be shut down, will report. There are others on the ground that feed it information. I'm not affiliated. This is just my opinion, but I think that they're probably the fairest. At least they will counterbalance the monopoly on the media on the other side on this particular story.
I have 2 questions. So first question is, if may Allah protect us all, but if in case of any event like what happened in things like that, what would you recommend for our sisters who are in kids? I mean, who do we connect other than 911? Do you recommend anything to anyone
Yeah, I mean, you always, you always want to report it to CAIR. I mean, something at this level, you're obviously contacting the police 911. Any safety issue, let's be clear, any immediate, imminent danger, you call the police, 911, okay? If it's not imminent, or if the situation has passed, or if it's safe enough for you to video or take pictures, you do so. Then you contact us, and we contact the police on your behalf with you. But we do that to ensure that there's follow-up. Sometimes when it's smaller incidents, it falls between the cracks. But really, your question is not about if it happens. Your question is, how do you prevent it? Because if it happens, I mean, you're not going to be contacting CARE, filing a discrimination form on somebody. But let me first say, these situations are very rare. I don't want our community to have a panic attack or a reaction. I mean, these are insanely rare. Okay, inshallah, they never happen again. But generally speaking, there should be precaution. Our messages should have safety. Your homes, your doors should be locked. But you shouldn't change your lifestyle. I haven't changed my lifestyle. And I'm on the media. Everybody sees me. They know my positions. I'm not saying I'm immune, but I can say my lifestyle hasn't changed, and it's not going to change. Leave it to Allah. It's already reasonably, careful.
I have one more question about all these donations and collections that happen. On the other hand, we are also hearing everything blocked. I mean, nothing is making it over there. Is there any place, I mean, that you would recommend?
No, I'm recommending you continue to support them. These are the only venues that you would support them through. It's not like they're the ones not going in. They're closing the border for everybody. So whoever else you choose, it's going to be the same situation. But these guys, the ones that you're donating to, probably is the CAT Foundation, Islamic Relief, the Med Global, the Palestinian American Medical Association, whoever, the well-known names. They will pass it on as soon as they're able. But there's all these negotiations and pressure from different external sources and from organized groups that we're involved with in Europe, et cetera, that are pushing to open the borders. And there's been a few that have been allowed in already, but not nearly enough. But that's part of the crisis, isn't it? That's part of why we're doing the ethics. First distracted. Oh. Sorry.
I just wanted to add that, one, thank you. But I wanted to add that also contact who's trying to track what's happening.
No. I'm being very frank, and CIGC and CARE is one group. We've been meeting with each other around the clock. When I say no, I don't want them inundated with things that they don't handle. They don't have attorneys that work on these cases. We report to them as needed on these cases. Generally, the leaders should definitely coalesce with the CIGC leaders. So when we're talking about hate crimes, you don't want to report that to CIGC. You're wasting CIGC's time and your time, and the capacity situation, it becomes a mess. Even with us, it's already a lot, and we have supposedly the capacity. We're trying our best, right? So what do you want to, leaders should be connecting with CIGC. Leaders of masajid, leaders of school, but rank and file individuals who face discrimination situations, you go to our website. It's not urgent, if it's not imminent, you fill out a form. That's the best way. A lot of people will call me, they're on Messenger, they'll send me a Facebook message, WhatsApp, and I'll have to do what I'm asking them to do. And I'd rather they do it directly because it'll actually save time, but also I'll be able to do other things that I need to do for the community that are more important than me filling a form. So if you can fill a form, do it. If you need to call, someone will help you when you call. These are the two ways you do it. If it's an emergency or a big issue, you are welcome to contact me directly if you like. You can also go through the official channels and we'll get to it, but I'll be at your disposal, inshallah. Does that make sense as far as?
That does. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes. We are now dealing with crisis. Take any So how have back in the day, how we can do something like that, even over years, how we can plan something that will be have strong advocacy for those people
That's a big question. It requires a lot of, I mean, if you want an honest answer, okay? Think about when there's not a crisis, which is most of the time. What do we, where, draw a map. What do you do for a living? What do you do for a living? What's your job?
I work
Okay. So think back to your, school days and make a little diagram of where the capacity of the community, the resources of the community, the time of the community is spent when there's no crisis. You'll find the answer to your question. We've prioritized certain things, and that's fine. لكل امرئ ما سعى. For each human is what they seek. So if you want to build more masajid, you'll have a whole lot of masajid and no power. You want to expand them, you'll have a lot more expansion, no power. You want to have a whole lot of halaqas, where we talk to each other alone and repeat things over and over, and have conventions where only we attend and speak to each other over and over and have the same speakers giving the same speeches every year. I'm just giving you, clear and honest, because 19 years in this business, I'm done, going around circles. That's what you're going to have. 20 years later is going to look like 20 years before. The same people in the same bazaars and the same convention halls listening to the same speeches as the world goes by. If we're a community that actually wants to sit at a whiteboard or a blackboard and say, where is the need? Where is the problem? The problem that most of these conventions are blabbering about to begin with. And then start to ask, how can we create a path towards a solution? And do the diligence, but do the work. Raise the money, pay it, hire the people. You'll get a result. It's as simple as that. But quite frankly, I'm in an organization that's bent over backwards in good times to reach out to even, the masajid communities. And it's not until crisis that everybody starts, asking us to interact with it. There's a mosque that we've been begging for a small piece of support, $1,500. Quite frankly, I'm just putting this out there. 3 years. Yes, inshallah. Yes, inshallah. Yes, inshallah. As soon as this happens, they've called me 12 times wanting me to give a talk, which I'm happy to do. I sent them the attorney same day. But I said, I just want you to remember, we've been chasing you down for a pledge you've made that's pocket money for this kind of work for 3 years. And you couldn't even bother to fully roll the pledge. All the khutab and all the beautiful big beards, mashallah, beautiful, Sunni people giving khutbahs about this and that of the Prophet. What about the amana of your own word? Is that not a lecture you have? Okay? I don't badmouth our community. This is a constructive and important message for us to look in the mirror and figure out who we are. Because I'm not here to play a game. I'm not here to act a role. My life is too important. My children are too important whom I don't see. It's been a week since I've seen one. I told him, man, you've grown. It's been a week. It was his birthday yesterday. And I'm not saying I'm better than anybody. I'm not saying my time is more valuable, but I'm saying I'm in this for the real deal, so I'm going to give real talk. And it's not to criticize. I love this community. I'll defend it to the day I die. I'm saying this in closed doors to you, the community. Because I'm not going to say it outside to criticize. I'm saying it inside to constructively build and face the realities of where we're at.
We're 8 minutes to just performing the concluding remarks. If there are any more questions,
I think people have heard from me a lot. I don't want to overstay my welcome. Are there any other questions? If not, I actually want to defer. Yeah, go ahead. Did you have a question? Okay, I think the sister has one. Did you have one? Okay, I'll get to you. MashaAllah.
a great question.
Yeah.
He was asking if there's a way children can support.
So let me ask you that question. And you don't have to answer it now. I don't want to put you on the spot. But what do you think is an interesting way to do that? What would you like to do? Do you have any ideas in your mind? How about if you and your friends make a project where you draw nice pictures to support the children of Gaza and say, we remember you. And then you give it to your mom, who gives it to us, and we post it. We share it with everybody. What do you think of that? Do you like drawing or coloring? You do? Okay, let's try that. If you have a better idea, tell your mom and she'll tell me. How's that?
Yeah, let's take one last question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So you mentioned some people were fired. Sorry, guys.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sorry.
So the question is related to if people, for example, get fired for expressing their opinions on social media, what are their civil rights and how can CAIR help in those situations?
So you would contact us, we would look into it. We would look to see if there's an employment case, and if there is, we would go in that direction. It would be an employment discrimination lawsuit, quite simply. Because one should not be fired for expressing their genuinely held religious beliefs or political beliefs. You know, it depends on the message. Employers sometimes, many times, are at will, but if it's a clear case of what we call retribution, then there are very possible grounds for a lawsuit. At the very least, there can be a cleanup of whatever damage has been done to the employee when we support them. There's a client out in Florida that I'm working with. Part of the reason why I've been so busy is, frankly, after Chicago being the epicenter of this, it was the first time for us. It's happened before at Whitechapel in North Carolina. Remember, with the 3 beautiful young people. And back then, remember, they tried to make it about a parking dispute. That's why when I'm saying getting ahead with the narrative. So don't take for granted that the narrative will be known. You have to let it be known. But now we are that. We're the epicenter. So I'm getting messages from all over the country, you know. So he's somebody we're working with. He's somebody who just took down some posters. And there was a website that said this guy's an anti-Semite for taking down these posters. And then his employer fired him and said, we don't employ terrorist sympathizers. And then the whole internet was talking about it. And so now he was been defamed, has been fired. So we took up his case and we made it clear, first of all, in a press conference with the right attorneys and the right media people, that it isn't illegal or immoral to remove a poster. Because in some acts, you can't argue. If somebody punches somebody and it's caught on camera, the act is wrong. It's assault. So it doesn't matter what the context is. But in this case, just to be clear, the act is not wrong. You can remove posters. These posters are not official posters. Somebody put them, somebody takes them. As a matter of fact, he consulted law enforcement. They said it's up to you if you want to take them down. It's not immoral either because his intention was good. Now, it comes to the intention. They said he took it down because he's an anti-Semite. No, he took them down because he didn't want to charge the atmosphere in Miami and have another wadia as a result of this charged atmosphere. That was his intention, right or wrong. And that's not a punishable intention. And so we're able to get that in the news cycle enough times to push back against the ugly defamation they had put out, this website. And now we're working with the employer to get him back on. If not, there'll be a lawsuit, probably. Right? So just, you know, we look into every case. Nobody should muffle their voice. Always speak, like I said, with principle, which means you speak fairly. Use the right terminology, the right words. When I say war crime and genocide, you know, I'm not saying, you know, the Zionist, you know, swine and this and that. You know, these are not derogatory terms. These are legal terms the United Nations defines. They have definitions I can point to in a dictionary. Thank you, everyone.
One last thing I want to mention, you were kind enough not to mention the money part, and I asked you several times, but you seem to just evade that point at all. But I want to mention it's important to support here. So the same way we support, mashallah, yesterday we had Islamic relief. A lot of people supported. This is direct money going to Gaza. But this is another aspect of supporting the whole struggle, is that funds to Lezex to also support CAIR to be able to continue to do their efforts. Donation is very easy on their website. We can collect it here as well, and it's in that's easy.
I want to thank you for that. You know, we are at banquet season. This is normally the time when we try to fundraise the most to support our work. Frankly, I have done none of that. And it's only a week away because of the importance of the stuff that we're dealing with. So thank you. You know, every time you forget yourself, a brother or a sister remembers you on your behalf. And I've seen this all over the community. I'm not concerned for our financial future with this kind of community. But to give you the not the pitch, he asked me to fundraise here, and we're not going to do that. You know, inshallah, whoever wants to support will do so on their behest. But just for you to know, the website is cairchicago.org, CAIR, chicago.org. That's where you can report discrimination under Get Help. That's where you can make a donation before our banquet and help get us to our goal. And I'd love to see you at that event, October 29th, Drury Lane, Sunday. Tell your friends about it. The masjid, mashallah, they got 2 tables. What we want to do that night is basically re-energize ourselves, refuel this organization to go hard for another year, inshallah. And we got to put our money and our effort in our mouth and our energy where our mouth is, inshallah. Jazakumullah khair. Thank you, Brother Nader. Thank you to the community. Assalamu alaikum.